Happy birthday to me. Happy birthday to me. Let's forget it. I'm no singer. But, yes, what you just saw is true. The Political Playbook, for the second year in a row, wished old PJ here a happy birthday. And I have to say, was probably the most surprise for a birthday I ever got. Now you're wondering, wait a minute, you just said that they wished you a happy birthday last year. Wouldn't that be the biggest surprise? No, I'll tell you why. I was surprised last year. However, didn't think it was going to happen this year, and I'll tell you why. It's because, I write for Newsbusters, and I did an absolutely brutal but well-deserved story about Politico, and I didn't think there was any way in hell after I wrote that story. In fact, as I was writing the story, I says, well, there goes my birthday greetings for next May 31st. But, much to my surprise, and I have to speculate as to the reasons why they did wish me a happy birthday. And I'll tell you what, let me give you a little background here. I write for Newsbusters, and everybody has their little area of interest or their bailiwick. For example, Clay Waters there, he sort of specializes in the New York Times, although not exclusively. Another example is a certain writer that thinks he's a professional bowler, Mark Finkelstein. He sort of covers Morning Joe. Well, my bailiwick, not exclusively, is Politico. And as a result, this happened. This is something that the media is desperately sent down the memory hole. It's still in my memory, and I've got the proof. Do you remember the Paul Pelosi assault last October, late in October, just about a week before the midterm election? I'm sure you do, or many of you do, even though the media sort of forgot. As soon as the election was over, that went down the memory hole. But what happened is his the perp, the alleged perpetrator of the attack on Paul Pelosi, his name was David DePape, or maybe, I'll call him the Poppy, like as in poppy seeds, because this guy, he was a sort of a hippie type, weed smoking, a nudist. In his yard he had BLM and gay pride flags. Obviously he's a vicious MAGA Republican, right? Well, yeah, if that surprises you, that's what the media was perpetrating, and they based it on some media posts that he allegedly posted just a day or two before the attack. Yeah, all the way through his life, he's like just your typical. He was like a crazy hippie type, nudist, weirdo, with the BLM and gay pride flags in his yard. But somehow, a day or two before the attack, he had posts that we never saw that proved he was a MAGA Republican. Yes, ladies and gentlemen. David DePape was as much of a MAGA Republican as those two MAGA Republicans that assaulted Jussie Smollett in the middle of the night in Chicago when it was sub-freezing weather. So, anyway, the thing that was absolutely hilarious about it is the desperation, the extreme lengths that Politico went to promote the story that the attacker of Paul Pelosi is a vicious, angry MAGA Republicans, and all Republicans and conservatives must denounce him. You must denounce him. And that was going on and on. I could almost picture the newsroom at Politico where one of the guys in charge there, one of the editors in charge, was going, "Everybody, stop what you're doing. Work only on the Paul Pelosi story. You must all stop what you're doing. Work only on the Paul Pelosi story. Get with it." And, it was like the 29th and the 30th of October. So, I could see the staff there. They're getting ready for Halloween, parties. Halloween fell on a Monday. So, obviously, the parties were going to be on that Saturday, Sunday. They just want to go home. But this guy here is going, stop what you're doing. You must work on a Paul Pelosi story. Get as many out as you can. Of course, maybe it was a little bit different than that, because the new owner of, he came in last year, is some guy from Germany. So maybe it could have sounded more like, Achtung, Achtung, you must cover the Paul Pelosi attack. You must cover the Paul Pelosi attack. Mach schnell, mach schnell, mach schnell. Now, I know what some of you are thinking there. Yeah, that's a funny story, PJ, and you're a nice guy and all that, but come on, you're exaggerating. No, I'm not. I've got the goods, because remember, I covered the story. Do you want to see exactly how many stories in one day, at one time, on a cover, on a front page of Politico, that were being devoted only to the story? I'm not going to say we're going to see it. We're going to see it. Let's take a look right now at my story that I did on October. It was published October 30th. So let's take a look at my story about Politico going over the top. Everybody, stop what you're doing. Stop what you're doing. We got to concentrate on Paul Pelosi. We have to push that story about MAGA Republicans attacking Paul Pelosi. Poor Paul Pelosi. So let's take a look. So here's the story I did about the Paul Pelosi story that appeared in Politico. And it says here, Politico publishes 11 Pelosi home break-in stories at the top of the front page. Well, actually, when I started this story, that I had the headline as saying, Politico publishes eight Pelosi home break-in stories at the top of the front page. Well, what happened was I started this story early in the afternoon, and while I'm writing it, I didn't get finished with it until later that evening. And I think almost, it says 11 Pelosi home break-in stories. I think it took me almost 11 hours to write it. This was absolutely the longest story I ever wrote for Newsbusters, because it wasn't that's what it started out as, but as I'm writing it, they kept adding more and more. I'd go, and like an hour later, as I'm into it, there's another Paul Pelosi break-in story. So went to 9, then I kept on working. I went to 10, finally 11, 8, 9, 10, 11. So anyway, here, let's take a look at now. Here. It says Politico is so intent on suggesting to its readers that right-wing evil Republicans were responsible, at least indirectly, for the break-in of Nancy Pelosi's home, in which her husband, Paul Pelosi, ended up in a hospital due to being hammered, that they have published on Friday and Saturday not 1 or 2 or even 3 or 4 stories on the topic, but 11, count them, 11 stories at the very top of the home page. So many stories that only 6 of them were able to fit in the photo, as you can see on this page. So here's a photo. Here's only 6. They actually had the photos. 6. They were able to. I was able to only fit in six of the photos here. But there was more. So anyway, here's the first article I covered of the 11 was Pelosi attack rattles an already skittish campaign trail. And now here we come to the theme. Here we come to the theme of evil Republicans. Evil Republicans, folks. Remember, next week, November 8th, is the midterm election. So keep this in mind. So here's highlighted. Republican ads targeting Pelosi and other congressional figures have proliferated nationally and trended more violently. It is a symptom of an unhealthy political culture, and GOP candidates in particular need to be mindful of their rhetoric on election night. Of course, they're quoting somebody there, but come on, this went exactly what Politico thinks also. Oh, speaking at a Detroit campaign rally on Saturday afternoon, former President Barack Obama called on Republicans to turn down the temperature, please, on violent rhetoric. Please, please, MAGA Republicans, you're so violent. You're so violent. Can't you turn down the rhetoric? And remember that on Election Day, everybody. Next week, everybody, remember that. The next story, right below that one, continues with exactly the same things about dangerous Republican rhetoric. Attempted hack on Pelosi raises questions on motive, family protections. Evidence now points to an unhinged individual inspired by years of demonization of the speaker. This is what happens when responsible leaders tolerate the intolerable for political gains, he added, referring to consistent political attacks levied against Pelosi by Republicans. Quoting somebody, but you know what? We're talking about Politico. Here, other Democrats were more direct in pointing. Other Democrats were more direct in pointing the finger at their fellow members of Congress for not rushing back forcefully enough through the. Other Democrats were more direct in pointing the finger at their fellow members of Congress for not pushing back forcefully enough in recent years against the rise in threats and political violence. Yeah, the other members of their fellow members of Congress, meaning Republicans are violent and angry. Remember that next week, November 8th. Please remember that. You would think that 2 stories at the top of the Politico homepage would be enough to hammer home their point that Republicans are somehow dangerous. So please don't vote for them in the midterms. But that is followed by a completely redundant 3rd story with the same message. Law enforcement agencies rush to assess new threats to lawmakers. Here we go. On Capitol Hill, Democrats had long warned that Pelosi, as a subject of unrelenting Republican attack ads and internet conspiracy theorists, was in particular danger. But there was also a larger concern that the modern political and media climates had created a situation in which lawmakers writ large were being increasingly targeted. Yeah, lawmakers, meaning the Democrats were being targeted, by Republicans. That's exactly what it is. Evil, oh yeah, here. Evil, nasty Republicans with their unrelenting attack ads. And in case you don't notice, we have 11 repeating that theme over and over again. And the next completely redundant overkill story in which you know who are the bad guys in Pelosi's status as GOP campaign ad villain faces new scrutiny after violent home invasion. Here we go. Here's the highlights of it. Republicans, those nasty evil Republicans, have targeted Pelosi among the highest ranking women ever to serve in the U.S. government during the election cycle after election cycle. And then here, the GOP's laser focus on Pelosi, poor Nancy Pelosi, while hardly a new phenomenon, is drawing new criticism in the wake of the violent assault on her husband early Friday morning. But we're not done yet, because we have Pelosi assault is the latest in series of attacks against political figures. That was about attacks on public officials, which included mostly Democrats as the victim, although Steve Scalise was included since it would have been too obvious if he were not on the list. However, Rand Paul, who was violently assaulted, described in some of the media as a landscaping dispute by Trump-hating anti-GOP neighbor, was notable by his absence from the list. Yeah, that's right. We can't generalize. Please, folks, don't generalize about Democrats because some left-wing loony attacked Rand Paul in his yard. Still a glutton for yet more? Well, take a dive into the world of batty Republicans and Democrats lash out at GOP after Pelosi assault. A growing number of Democrats are openly blaming Republicans for failing to rein in a rise in violent rhetoric in the wake of an assault on Speaker Nancy Pelosi's husband, who survived with serious injuries. As police continue to investigate the attack, several of Pelosi's fellow Democrats are pointing fingers at their opponents in Congress, accusing Republican leaders of largely sidestepping the issue of political violence and rising threats for years. Shame on you, shame on you, shame on you. Some also called for what they saw as a lackluster public response to the assault, including from House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy. Yes, folks, I know there's a lot of material here, but hey, we're talking 11, count them, 11 stories on the front page of Politico, hammering the same theme of the batty Republicans attacking poor little Democrats. Conveniently, all of this appears about a week before Election Day, 2022. So here we go. Here's the next one. In case you still haven't figured out who Politico feels the villains are, they slam it home yet again with Pelosi attacker was immersed in 2020 election conspiracies. David DePapi, who in custody and facing charges that include homicide and elder abuse for the attack on Paul Pelosi at the couple's home, also appears to have embraced falsehoods about the outcome of the 2020 election and political conspiracies, according to his social media and online posts. Where are those? Where is that? Where are those posts? I mean, they happened just a few days before the attack. Very convenient, right? I mean, where have we seen them? Do we have any links to them? What they seem to have disappeared in the ether. Okay, anyway, back to the narrative. The connection to election falsehoods promoted by former President Donald Trump and his supporters immediately led many to conclude that the 42-year-old DePapi was motivated by politics, though police have not said what motivated him to break into the couple's Pacific Heights home, calling out, "Where's Nancy?" before dawn Friday. Yeah, it's almost as if Donald Trump himself and his supporters and his MAGA supporters broke into Paul Pelosi's home instead of a dope-smoking, weirdo, hippie nudist with BLM and gay pride flags outside his Berkeley home. Right. Typical MAGA there, right, folks? The police have not yet determined the motive for the perp yet. Politico is not the least bit shy to shout out their theory, including this tidbit in Paul Pelosi told the attacker he needed to use the bathroom, called 911 from there. We know what fueled this. It is years of vitriol and disinformation, Dean said, citing GOP leaders who have allowed politically motivated lies, including those about the validity of the elections, to become mainstream. What we have sown is what we are reaping. So see the deal here? How dare you question the outcome of the 2020 election? I mean, the 2020 election, it was just as valid as the Lyndon Johnson landslide in 1948. Oh no, never mind that one. But the 2020 election, despite what else you might have heard, it was absolutely a valid. Don't you dare question it, or you are a violent monster like David DePapi. Yeah, we also had political columnist Jeff Greenfield tries to rise above the fray, and America's darkest forces are being unleashed, but ultimately blames GOP, especially since it is just a little over a week until the midterm elections. Yeah, so that's his bit. And then finally, we come to the end, my folks. And actually, I think the last one was the absolute funniest of them all. The 11th and final, for now, political story. Where will this political violence end? Look to the 1850s. What? Yeah, so they jump back in time, 170 years, is it? Yeah, 170. We got to go back in time. Let's take a time trip to the 1850s. So this is the 90th. Joshua Zeitz somehow manages to segue from the Pelosi home break-in to January 6th, and then to the Jim Crow era, and then further back to the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, then a bit forward to the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854, before bouncing around all over the 19th century. You have to pinch yourself to remember that this was all because of a Pelosi home situation for which the police have yet to determine the motive. But hey, at least it resulted in a really overlong history lesson from someone obviously really worried about the outcome of the midterm elections. So there you have it. Over the top insanity from Politico. You know, I have a feeling that after it was over, especially after they saw more story, they probably went, oh God, what happened to us? We went out of our minds over this. You know, yeah, we should have been more subtle. Yeah, well, subtle. You know what? Years ago, the media was also biased, like 40, 50 years ago, but they were at least a little bit more subtle, a lot more subtle. Now it's like over the top, like, hey, everybody, a MAGA Republican attacked Paul Pelosi. Remember, next week is the election. Yeah, so they basically wanted, and they tried to do this. They tried to, this is an old technique. They try to get Republicans to apologize for what this hippie weirdo, nudist, pot-smoking, Berkeley resident with BLM and gay pride flags in his front yard. You must apologize. You understand? How dare? What do you say about this? What does this say about the modern Republican Party? What does this say about MAGA? What does this say about Donald Trump? Explain yourself. You must explain yourself. Apologize now. Yeah. So that was their whole deal. So what happened? After the election was over, safely over, right? Memory hole. Let's take a look. Yes, that story went down the memory hole, pretty much. So here we are, weeks later. Politico, wow, what a surprise. Politico dropped obsession with Paul Pelosi attack after election was over. After a total of, and this is by yours truly, anyway, after a total of 11 Paul Pelosi assault stories appearing in the October 29th edition of Politico, in which the alleged assailant, David Dupapi, was portrayed with scant evidence as a MAGA Republican for whom GOP officials were expected to apologize for, the sum total of these stories, once the midterms were safely passed, dwindled to the extent that for the last couple of weeks there has been no follow-up on the investigation of how this attack unfolded. Yes, how convenient. What makes it more curious is that after their October 31 attack upon conservatives for questioning the official account of the assault, there's been complete silence from Politico on the retraction of an NBC story and suspension of the reporter Miguel Almaguer for revealing that Paul Pelosi answered the door on the night police arrived. Yeah, he actually, this was pretty funny. Miguel Almaguer, he was punished for telling the truth. It turned out he was. We'll get into that. You know what? I'm going to do another video about this, about what happens to reporters that accidentally tell the truth. In the case of Miguel Almaguer, he went from like a regular NBC reporter, he ended up doing a weather report. So that was pretty funny. That's your punishment. You tell the truth on network news, and your punishment is you have to do stupid weather reports that anybody could do. Okay. So why the lack of curiosity by Politico over a story that it initially went into an absurd overkill mode in promoting? Well, Politico inadvertently provided the reason in its final story related to Paul Pelosi. Some people voted because political violence has gone too far. Yeah, see, here it is. She's admitting the truth here. Listen to this. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said Sunday she knew some individuals inspired a vote last week because of political violence including the brutal attack on her husband. In other words, mission accomplished. This story was politicized by the media, especially by Politico with their 11 front-page stories, and it affected the midterm elections. Woohoo! Mission accomplished. And now we can just drop this whole story, and anybody that brings it up is a vicious, lousy conspiracy theorist. Anyway, that's the reason why I was so surprised that Politico wished me a happy birthday. Because I came down hard. I mean, I don't know, maybe they gave me a birthday greetings last year hoping that, I sort of calmed down a little bit on my coverage. No, just the opposite. I upped it. I mean, seriously, have you ever seen anything more absurd than 11, count them, 11 front page stories about how the attacker, the perp in the Paul Pelosi attack was a MAGA Republican, despite all evidence to the contrary. So anyway, rain's starting to come down hard now. But you know what? I had so much fun doing this. Maybe I'll do a story about Miguel Almaguer was punished for telling the truth. That's a grave sin about the Paul Pelosi attack. So anyway, I'll see you guys later. And I already had my birthday cake the other day. Maybe I'll have some birthday pizza.